Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another episode of Citizen Representatives Podcast. I'm Tyler. I'm here with my friend Adam. Adam, how are you doing today?
Very well. Thanks, Tyler. How about you?
I'm doing well. I'm excited to be here and talk about some important subjects, mainly the Prince Harry and Meghan Markle. I think that's of everyone's interest and the most important thing in the world, apparently, at this time.
It, it is an amazing story. Um, I mean, when you're that, when you have that much ease in your life and you find a way to complain, I, my hat's off. My hat's off to those people because, um, it takes incredible amount of self-absorption, and I it's been fascinating. I feel terrible for them. So I hope their lives get better because what would we do without looking at them and putting them on that pedestal and not having, something to aspire to, which is a life of ease and wealth and comfort. And we
Is
need that.
is Meghan Markle a secret agent of the CIA? Sent to the royal family to kind of break up the monarchy.
It's possible in this day and age. I believe nothing and I believe everything. So let's leave it at that. No, I mean, you know, it's an interesting. I don't understand royalty. It's kind of fun, I guess. You have this interesting little thing going on in England, but at some point, it's just time to be done with that, isn't it? I mean,
I
we,
think
we
the
have
time ended
royals.
a long time ago.
On the other hand, I look at it and I go, maybe that's what you need is a kind of a fake um, royalty because British citizens can then kind of discriminate between what's real and what's just kind of pretend but kind of fun. Whereas in this country, our politicians are the aristocracy and the royalty, right? And they act with the same kind of complete. I am the center of the world. What I say matters, you know. And so maybe you need that separation because it gives you some clarity about reality versus fantasy. And here in this country, it's one and the same. It's an illusion, right? You have the reality is the fantasy, and that's where are we headed with that?
Is there a kind of ideological thing that with the attraction to kind of the facade or the aura around the the king or the queen and all of the royalty over there? Have you noticed that, or is it just kind of everyone kind of has that
I don't know if it's
fascination?
ideological, but it's certainly cultural, and I can see. Okay, yeah. I mean, it's been around for a long time. It kind of the idea of having this standard. This is how you act. This is what we aspire to in a community. Properness. Um, being good citizens of the country for the good of the whole. And it is sort of that ensign on the hill that people look towards to take their direction as to how to live their lives. And there's certainly a huge influence of that cultural um, politeness and civility that we kind of associate with Britain, the UK. And so there's probably some value there, but at some point, I think it's time to go. And this seems like a good time. Although I don't necessarily want somebody like Meghan Markle to be the one that blows it up, but maybe that's what's needed. I don't know.
Well, interesting point. I think there's an attraction of a lot of people to the monarchy or a kind of a king because people a lot of people like to be just told what to do, and they like the idea of one person doing that, because it removes the responsibility from the people to make their own decisions and be kind of their own person. And when things go wrong, then we can blame someone else, and that's an unfortunate side effect of that type of governmental structure. And in the United States, we of course it's supposed to be a meritocracy. You're supposed to get by on your own merits and things like that. And a lot of people really don't like that.
Right. No, that's a good point. Yeah, I don't know. The idea of royalty and divine right. I mean, I think most people realize it's not a divine right, but the idea of royalty, really, they're just wealthy landowners, right? They own majority of the land in the UK. That's what sustains them and makes them have any power. So, uh, yeah, I don't know. It's funny how that can really dominate the news cycle. More
Well,
importantly
yeah,
than, and
it's kind of
it just
crazy that,
good distraction from all the bills that are getting passed in the meantime, right?
or other things. Some other sons in the Prince Andrew.
Yeah, that's a good point.
He's kind of caught up in some scandals that are the Queen doesn't want anything to hit the news about, and this may be a good distraction. I mean, how do you first of all, how do you allow someone, not that you can control your wife at all, but just to go on national worldwide TV and say and allege that someone in your family or in the home is a racist, and said something along the lines of what color is the baby going to be, and that
Did you
that's
just
just
say
not.
how could you let your wife allow your wife?
I know
Is
that's
that what,
that's
is
why
that what
I
you
kind of
said?
backtracked. That's why I kind of backtracked. I would hope that someone would say, okay, what are we going to talk about? Well, I'm going to say that your so and so is a racist. Well, maybe we shouldn't do that.
Yeah, yeah. Either
There should
spouse,
be kind of a there should be kind of a
some agreement between spouses,
some
right?
communication. And we're assuming maybe there was. Maybe he was there too,
On
and
board.
but it'd be convenient if he didn't happen to be in the room at the time, and whatever.
Sorry to call you out. I just knew there's a certain
I know that's why I
there's a
immediately
certain
caught myself
climate.
and tried to kind of backtrack and cover myself. On a kind of a funny note, did you see the tweet by Burger King?
No.
Okay, so Burger King, they tweeted the women belong in the kitchen. And their follow-up tweet was, there aren't nearly as many women representatives or women represented in top chef type of situations in restaurants. So the initial tweet
Oh,
was kind of inflammatory, women belong in the kitchen. And then the follow-up tweet was, because they're not as well represented as men are. But of course, nobody reads the follow-up tweets, and it just kind of blew up in their faces. So you have to be careful what you say. I'm sure that they kind of knew that this something would happen like that,
yeah.
but to not anticipate that, just kind of the culture and climate that we're going through right now is um, kind of funny.
Tweets aren't as limiting anymore, right? So you can actually put some space between your text, right? That may have been the way to do it. Dot dot dot, and then dot dot dot. There's not enough top chefs in the kitchen,
In,
so
in a
it's a
in a different era, this type of publicity nobody would go try to cancel Burger King. It would just be getting Burger King in the news, because who's talking about Burger King? Nobody cares about Burger King.
no,
At least I don't.
no.
Maybe you do.
I don't talk about Burger King other than I'm not a real fan of fast food.
We're gonna get to
But
restaurants a little bit later. Um,
oh, good.
yeah, and kind of a preference. Some people call it a preference cascade. Maybe I may be misunderstanding that phrase, but we're here with citizen representatives, the idea is that we get together with people in our state and in our district. We come together to elect people with the understanding that they vote with the majority of the people. There would be online votes that we come together to do to help inform the representatives on how to vote. And that's what this podcast is aiming to spread, the idea that people should be more involved with what is going on in the politics of the day. And so we just talk about things that we think are important, trying to put the idea out there that um, the idea of citizen representatives. So I just wanted to give a little kind of update on things that are happening with citizen representatives. We've talked about the idea of when people come together in their district, we need to be able to register them to vote for these bills and things like that. I came upon as I was investing a little bit of the small fractions of Bitcoin that I own. There are apps out there that are able to verify your identity, and the way that they do that is you download the app, you scan your identification, whether it be a passport or a driver's license or whatever, and then you put your face. It basically takes a picture of your face and you move it around, and so it's doing a facial recognition. And somehow in their databases they're able to verify your identity. And so I'm thinking of the idea was that we would verify people along these same lines with offices scattered throughout the United States, and we'll still have that. But this may be this type of technology may be something that we'd be able to use to streamline the process and allow people to register from home rather than have to come into an office somewhere. Now, granted, there will always be people who need help technologically. For instance, there's a gentleman in my ward, the congregation that I attend. He he called me up and he needed help on his computer, and he had the wrong pin. It was written down right where he needed it to be written down, but he didn't realize that that was the right one, and so we spent about 30 minutes before I decided to look into his password book and find his pin. And then he couldn't print a page because he couldn't find the print button. And super sweet gentleman, but there are always going to be people like that that don't have the capability. They didn't grow up using computers. They just don't have the skill set to do that. And so there will always be a need for locations like that for people for some hands-on type help. But we will always have a verification of the identity of the person so that they can vote on bills. Well, if time allows, we'll get to some the HR1, the bill that's coming up that's already been voted on in the House. It's passed the House and it will be going to the Senate, and if time allows, we'll get to that. Another thing Adam and I have a small group of people that work with us, and we promote things that we find important. One of those things was a Project Goodwill that we talked about last week. Others are the Keys of Knowledge, which is a study group that helps us understand true principles and things that help us be better people, help us understand the world better. And anyway, those people, there's a couple of people who are going to help edit some of the videos, help put out smaller snippets, because I know that it's hard to many times sit and watch a podcast for an hour and 10 minutes, and especially when you're first starting out. I mean, I'm not very entertaining at all. I have a dry voice that's monotone. Adam is a little bit more dynamic than I am, but he's no Glenn Beck. No offense, Adam.
None
Um,
taken.
so we're looking to on avenues and ways to help promote the product and what we're trying to do, and so we have some volunteers to help us do that, and I'd like to thank those people publicly because they will, now that they're going to have to watch these videos, it's going to double our viewership of the podcast. So it's pretty exciting. So I wanted to talk about something that I found was particularly funny this week. Not just the Meghan Markle and the Prince Harry. It's Harry, right?
Harry. Yep.
Or is it Andrew? Is it Andrew?
Harry. No,
I
Harry.
miss. Okay,
Markle and Harry, and you had it right earlier.
okay.
Andrew's got the
He's the older son. He's their uncle.
yeah, he's got the issues with
Okay.
whatever.
Who's Harry's brother? I'm spacing his name.
William.
William and Kate. Now she seems very stately and very
Yeah.
nice. Anyway, so this was I first saw this story a couple months ago. There's this it's a company that is involved in the oil industry, and they decided to give their employees some jackets for Christmas, and they decided that they were going to give the employees North Face jackets. North Face is a brand that produces outdoor apparel and things of that nature. The company is named Innovex, and it says North Face rejects jacket order from Texas Oil and Gas Company. It says, I'm reading an article here on KWTX. Innovex Downhole Solutions says it was recently denied an order of jackets by the North Face, a popular outdoor recreation company, because the oil and gas that are in the oil and gas business. And the reason was because the, let me see if I can find it. The company providing the jackets said North Face doesn't want to support the oil and gas industry in the same way they'd reject the porn industry or tobacco industry. Okay, because they produce hydrocarbons and they just didn't want to be associated with anything in the energy sector that has to do with oil and hydrocarbons. Now, of course,
What's
the
what's
irony
this?
is, go ahead.
What's the scenario where a company like that would support the porn and tobacco industry, other than individual usership? I'm just
That's a
trying
good
to
question. Like
figure that out. I don't know.
maybe
I'm
they
not
have maybe they place certain ads, and not
sponsors.
that I would know. They could sponsor particular people that they product placement. Um,
They could sponsor the annual awards show for pornography. I mean, that might be
is
something
there an
if
annual
they were
award show?
interested. If they were interested in doing that. Oh, I know you've been. We've met there, didn't we?
Well, I catch it virtually and I hide my tracks. Of course, okay, so now the funny part, not okay, so not only is it funny that first of all, North Face, their products are made the large majority of the raw materials that go into their products are made from hydrocarbons and oil. So that's kind of the irony here. And so the story here is Colorado Oil and Gas taunts the North Face at mock award ceremony. Okay, I'm going to read this. The North Face is being celebrated by the very industry it snubbed. The Colorado-based company recently rejected an order, the North Face, for 400 jackets from a Texas oil and gas company because it reportedly didn't want to be associated with an industry that it doesn't meet its brand standards. Ironically, the jackets in almost every product the North Face produces and sells is made with nylon, polyester, and polyurethane, all of which come from petroleum. So the Colorado Oil and Gas Association decided to have some fun with the situation. It bestowed its first ever Extraordinary Customer Award on the North Face, saying it appreciates the company for its abundant use of oil and gas. this is just this is so funny to me. Um, Dan Haley, who heads up the Industry Trade Association, held a mock award ceremony that was more like a roast. The CEOs of oil and gas companies lampooned the North Face, pointing out that its parent company is even building a hangar at Centennial Airport for its private jet fleet. So not only are, to some estimates, 75% of the product that they ship come from oil or petroleum products, but now they're building a big hangar for their private jets. the not North Face, but the company that owns North Face.
Yeah.
So the irony abounds, and I know you have some thoughts on energy, Adam. What do you think in like 2 minutes?
Oh, 2 minutes. No way. Well, I mean, first of all, I love fossil fuels being used to help us get to the next level. And so, yeah, no, I mean, the hypocrisy is in this story is just, I mean, it's too obvious, right? Um, these oil, petroleum, they have incredible use, and that goes beyond just burning of energy. And so, to think that we can eliminate that from our lives, and then of course, the whole jet set hypocrisy that seems to be so prevalent, especially among the most environmental among us. Those, good enough for thee, but not for me. I get my private jet, but you're going to have to burn wood in your home. So, I mean, that's one part of it. Um, Energy is a very complex subject, and 2 minutes doesn't do it justice. I want us to use fossil fuels to get us to the next level, and that really should be eventually nuclear. But ironically, um, as hypocritical as some of these a company like North Face is on this issue, um, fossil fuel companies are some of the most hypocritical when it comes to the environment. They give money to environmental groups, um, and then in turn and promote to try and promote that we need green energy, but it's in the interest of promoting wind and solar, which can't sustain us ultimately. It cannot produce the energy dense needs of the for the energy dense needs of the world. And so, um, and they do that because it knows that it will make us eternally dependent on fossil fuels. And so there's hypocrisy everywhere when it comes to energy, and really, and the tragedy of all that is that nuclear gets this bad rap for being dangerous, and it's just not the case. Sorry, that was 4 minutes.
Yeah, your time's up. The if they were able to, remember Back to the Future, how they had in the time the DeLorean, they were able to
Yeah,
put garbage in the reactor, and what did they call it? Do you remember? It was
the
there was
flux
some catch.
capacitor was the first one. I don't know if it was.
I don't remember if it was the second or the third that they had that come out where you just open up the little lid and plop it in. That
Yeah,
that was an alternative energy source. If they were able to create something like that for pats on the back from these liberal companies, like the energy crisis would be averted. It would be solved.
yeah.
Just a little energy that people are patting themselves on the back, or if the world were able to be run on virtue signaling, then you know that'd be just the abundance is there.
That would be genius if we could do that. Um, because really, the environmental community does not want energy independence. They absolutely don't want it. There's too much money in it, and too much power, and too much control.
The
And
grievance
so,
industry would lose its power, you're saying, if they didn't have something to complain about.
yeah, I mean, if you can create an issue that really shouldn't be an issue, you deny the one source of energy that really could help lift us into, to have clean burning fuel, abundance, infinite resource. If you had that, then you can't drive your campaigns, you can't do your protests, you can't, and there's so much money from government grants, and so much attention given to these companies that try and fix these little problems or have these investments in their green energy solutions that ultimately just can't they can't take us to where we need to go if we really care about the earth. And so they don't they I really question a lot. There's some that genuinely want clean air and all that, and but ultimately I think it's such an industry that created a complex there that that won't go away anytime soon unless people start wising up.
So just as a quick aside, how many different industries are there like that? I think there's the right now in the United States there's the racial grievance type thing. If we just all came together and of course there is racism. I don't think it's nearly as prevalent as the news is making out to be, but
Yeah.
those people who are pushing it, they wouldn't have a career, and um, that's something that one can think
And they
about.
couldn't draw government money to their causes, right? I mean, so much money gets allocated to these things where the people say,
Now
"Oh yeah,
again,
well,
again,
go
of course there is racism. I just don't think that babies are, you know, I don't think they're born with racial animus. They don't, they do recognize differences, but I don't think that they're not going to hate someone because of their race as they're born.
yeah,
I just don't think that's something that is true.
outright race." I mean, there's certainly prejudice, and there's Thomas Sowell has written a book, Discrimination and what's it called? Discrimination and Disparities, and I would highly recommend people that want to dive into the problems of race and discrimination to read his book. He's really outlined it quite well.
He's one of the best thinkers out there. That's definitely true. Now, just kind of parlaying this and kind of spinning off this discussion on the Texas Oil and Gas Company and North Face. Did We talked about this last week and when you can and can't deny someone service. So I don't know the exact specifics about the North Face denying selling jackets to a particular company, but the principles that I and Adam were trying to get across last week was that if you offer something that's off the shelf that you make for everyone that's exactly the same, you have no right to deny someone purchasing that product. Now, if that product is a creation of yours, they're each individually specific, they're different, then you might be able to do that. Now, like I say, I don't know the exact specifics, but in my understanding, they just created an order for 400 jackets, and the
Did they
North
have
Face said
embroid?
no.
Were they supposed to have embroidery on them or anything like that, or
Well, that
the company
I
logo?
they did, but I don't think the North Face was doing that themselves. That that
Mm,
was a that was a different company that was just a reseller of the North Face, I think. Now, this
mm,
is what I'm saying. I don't know the specifics, and maybe it was North Face themselves that was going to do the embroidery. Um, and in that case, that's kind of a gray area. I'm not sure how to if I know enough of the specifics to do that. But the point being that if you offer something that's off the shelf that's the same for everyone, you shouldn't be able to deny service or you shouldn't deny the ability for somebody to purchase that item from you.
yeah.
That's just part of being that's part of being a grown up and understanding that people are going to use products that aren't for their intended purposes.
Yeah. Well, and again, to diverge, it going back to their example of the porn industry as an example of somebody that they wouldn't support. I think that's an easy one for North Face because usually the porn industry doesn't use a lot of clothing. So I'm not sure I'm not sure that's a valid argument again, but anyway, sorry.
Thank you for bringing up the
I like
subject
saying
again.
porn. I aim to say porn as much as I can in this podcast. So
Okay,
it's
thank you.
it's
Luckily, I'm on the editing side. I can put in whatever word I can put in whatever word that I want to you to say it at that point, and it'll be perfectly. You won't be able to tell.
we
So
maybe need to come up with a code of conduct for our podcast in
yeah.
future episodes.
Anyway, that's something that people should be thinking about. Just the idea of denying service. I don't think that because with the cancel culture as it is, things that you would have never thought would have been, you know, not cancelable, things that you would have never thought would have been politicized are becoming politicized. And in the future, people will be denied, and they're already being denied services to banks. For instance, Gab, Gab.com, which is a kind of a Twitter alternative, they have had their banking quote unquote privileges or whatever revoked 4 different times. So they've had banking with a particular bank, and then that bank decides that they don't want to serve them anymore. So they've been through 4 different banks, and they have a reputation now that they're unbankable. And this is what's driving a lot of the Bitcoin boom is people are seeing that people are being canceled, and they're not going to be able to be part of society if you don't have access to a bank, which is ironic because a lot of the same people who are trying to ban people from banking are trying to get other people into banking. That's a whole other subject, but
Yeah.
um, it's just something that people should be aware of, and it's a little disconcerting to me.
Didn't Bank of America go into accounts of people, anybody that was in the vicinity of Washington on January 6th? Did you hear about that?
Yes.
And I don't even know that it wasn't like government subpoena. They just voluntarily went in and looked at people's accounts. So even if you didn't enter the Capitol and act like a buffoon and vandalize and participate in that fiasco, if you were just there, even just as a tourist, you might be targeted by your bank, which is just unbelievable.
So I have a funny story about that I heard from um, a family member by marriage. So sadly, my cousin's son passed away recently, and so my dad and I went down to the funeral, and we were talking with the other side of the family, and this gentleman said that some of his nieces and nephews attended the January 6th. What do they call it? Some people are calling it the insurgency or
Protest rally,
the protest, the rally, and so
protest slash rally.
they went there and they participated, and they said it was the most beautiful thing you've ever seen. They were taking pictures with nuns. There was nothing but love and just kind of community and getting together. Of course, there were these few people that kind of went AWOL and kind of did their own thing and broke windows, and I don't really want to get into that. But so this family member, he knew that they had gone there, and so he called them on a number that they didn't recognize, and left a message and said, this is so and so with the FBI. We understand that you were in DC. We'd like to ask you a few questions, something along those lines. And they didn't. He thought for sure that they would recognize his voice. They didn't recognize his number, and they didn't recognize his voice. And so they were flipping out because they'd seen exactly what you had seen in the news, that the Bank of America went and just did a query and said, okay, who bought plane tickets and who made another purchase while in DC? Who bought plane tickets to DC or nearby, and who made a purchase here and who bought a hotel, and so they had seen this and they flipped out, and they were calling anyone that they could find, people in government. They were really worried about this,
Wow,
um,
that's cruel.
and yeah, so uh, they have since forgiven him, I think. Um, but what I don't know is maybe that FBI is still going to contact them, the actual FBI, because they did meet the criteria that they did. They didn't go into the Capitol. They were just in the, with the other million people or however many people were there.
Yeah.
But they did meet the criteria that the Bank of America was using. They didn't bank with Bank of America, so they. Um, anyway, it was a funny story, but kind of scary at the same time
Yeah.
because there was it was a prank that this gentleman played on his family members, but it was so close to hitting, real life that they kind of flipped out.
Yeah, no,
So
that's
it's
beyond. That's pretty cruel. I don't know that I would.
uh,
I wouldn't let it drag on for very long if I did that. But
yeah, they all had a good laugh about it after the fact. But
yeah.
okay, so Adam had a, excuse me, I said to Adam, what would you like to talk about? And he said the convenience of cancellation. And so Adam, if you wouldn't mind, explain what you mean by that.
Oh, in relation to like a pandemic situation, right? That's what you're talking
Or
about.
however you mean it. I don't know. I think the convenience of cancellation, I think I took it a different way from when just reading what you said there, and um, which is somewhat related, but go ahead.
Well, I mean, cancellation's convenient. I mean, if you're an extremely sensitive person or group, then cancellation's the quickest way to get rid of that thing that's offending you. So, without getting into the psychology of that, I had been thinking about the pan in relation to the pandemic and just how much cancellation's gone on since this whole COVID um, thing started a year ago. You think about um, the way social media has shut people down, and other companies, like we were just talking about, these banks that are looking into to people, um, and and a lot of it in the name of, quote unquote, the science, which in a lot of cases isn't the actual science. It's merely um, some expert, some pundit quoted on TV on a news show that said something, and it becomes doctrine for a lot of people. And if you keep them in fear of something that, yeah, is dangerous, but yet maybe don't give perspective on that danger and that risk, um, that cost risk um, balance, then it's really easy to capture people and say, oh yeah, the expert said I should do this, or we should do this as a community. I'm a good person if I do this. And so it becomes really easy to label these things as science. And if somebody has an opinion contrary, no matter how much evidence they bring to the table, it it may not matter, because these companies have so much power to be able to just shut it down. If it questions the orthodoxy that is being um, given by um, these companies, especially social media, then um, it it just becomes a convenient, and you can keep going with that, right? You can do book bans. Somebody comes out with a book and says, here's what I've seen with the data um, on COVID. Here's an analysis. Let's talk through the actual facts. Let's look at the studies that have been done prior to COVID and since COVID. Let's look at those and dig into the data and figure this out. People just wanting to present evidence, and yet, because COVID has been branded with this incredible fear factor. I call it fear porn, just to throw that word back in there for you, Tyler. And I mean that seriously. Like, fear porn, I heard a commentator talking about this the other day, that it's driven on the same type of um, it feeds on the same type of energies that porn addiction does. We get addicted to media and clicking on, how many deaths today, how many people have contracted this disease, and people really get addicted to that. But the point being that when you're able to drive that fear in a community, um, and then everybody goes, yeah, that sounds reasonable. We should ban that book because it questions orthodoxy. It questions what the experts are telling us, instead of just simply asking the question and letting the expert answer and say, no, I understand they said this, but here's my evidence, and a lot of these so-called experts don't want to present anything. They don't want to say anything. They don't want to be questioned. And that to me should be a telltale sign that there is a, Houston, we have a problem here. When the experts don't want to explain themselves, they don't want to rebut what some other guy is saying. It's just it's so much easier and more convenient to just cancel than it is to have discussion. And for me, more information is always better. I don't care where it comes from or how crazy it is. Let's trust people to be intelligent and decide. Present both sides, and usually it's not two opposing sides. Usually, it's very nuanced. There's views all across the board. So that's that's the long answer to what I was talking about with the convenience of cancellation.
Do you think a lot of these institutions and companies were just looking for an excuse? Do you think they had this? Do you think they have this kind of um, compulsion or what's the word? Predilection? Is that a word?
Yeah.
Toward banning, and now they're looking for an excuse, and they found the excuse, and now they can.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, you got to dive into the psychology of each individual and institution. I think a lot of it is just driven by dollars. I mean, this has been huge for media, right? I mean, every time somebody clicks on a story, I mean, why do you think locally here in Utah? I mean, I think I ranted about this in our first episode. We were talking about local media, and I'm like, why would you go there for national news? All they do is reprint what's said in AP and Reuters and New York Times and CNN. These big media conglomerates who bottom line, I don't care what their predilections or their ideologies are, they just want clicks, right? More viewers, more watching.
Yeah.
And so when I have people tell me, well, I get my news from KSL, and I'm like, well, that's fine if you want to read about the school boards or what's going on in the state legislature, but you should probably branch out a little bit if you're getting your national news media from there, and at least explore a couple different sites, because otherwise you're just going to get the orthodoxy of the day. And I think a lot of it is, yeah, and then I think, yeah, and so one is money, right? And the other is power and control. And power and control is a little harder to divine as to how much, um, and usually power and control is a way to control money, right? But I think, certainly a lot of our experts are really intoxicated by the attention that they receive. I mean, how many epidemiologists, who the hell knew what an epidemiologist was, a year ago? Now everybody knows what an epidemiologist is, right? And so the stardom that comes with, and then you say something on camera and it's printed in bright lights, across headlines of newspapers and the ticker the tickers at the bottom of TV stations. I mean, suddenly you're a celebrity, and everything. Now they can bite you in the ass too, but suddenly you're in the limelight, and that's incredibly intoxicating. So yeah, I don't know if I've answered your question. I think certainly, I never want to deem something just nefarious, like people are out, ooh, they're in a back room, this group of six individuals going, how can we get the people and control them? I think it's just becomes a process of how a lot of these companies operate without actually looking at what the real consequences are. And the biggest one is taking away freedom, right? Freedom of the press and freedom of speech and freedom to think for yourself. And the more we limit that, if we're not looking at those consequences, then we're in big trouble. So
What's kind of disconcerting and kind of ironic to me is the people who should be most vigilant against attacks on the press and book banning and things like that are the very people in the press.
yeah,
There's a certain segment of these people of the press who they want their own clicks. but they don't think it'll ever come for them. So they don't want the competition, so they want people shut down. They want books banned. They want people deplatformed. And they like I say, they never think it's going to come for them, and it will.
You would think, right? And it has a little bit, but it goes back to this convenience that you get a little taste of that, and it's like, oh, we can cancel them. And yeah, a few people questioned our actions, but we got away with it. We can cancel more people.
So what I was alluding to, and I said, Adam took the convenience of cancellation, and that's his idea of how it affects, and I agree with you. When he first said that, I kind of took it a different way. Now I read one of the authors that I read is Nassim Taleb, and he's written books, The Black Swan, Anti-Fragile. The newest one is Skin in the Game, I believe. And so I don't know if it's a principle or if it's just kind of a something that he kind of understood and came up with, but this is part of. I'm going to read from an article that's part of his Skin in the Game book. It's a chapter from the Skin in the Game. And the title is The Most Intolerant Wins, the Dictatorship of the Small Minority, excuse me. And it says, how Europe will eat halal, why you don't have to smoke in the smoking section, your food choices on the fall of the Saudi king, how to prevent a friend from working too hard, and how to make a market collapse. We're not going to get into all of those things, but the general premise is this. And I'll give an example. I'm going to read a portion here. The minority rule will show us all it takes is a small number of intolerant, virtuous people in the form of courage for society to perform properly or to fall apart. So he's talking about the small group of people who are intolerant of whatever it is, and they force their views on people. And he gives an example of people who eat kosher. So the premise is there's only a certain amount of people who can eat kosher or will eat kosher. There's the other 90 whatever percent that doesn't have to eat kosher, but they can eat kosher. So let's say that you're catering a barbecue for your neighborhood, and you know that there's this one family who eats kosher, or let's say gluten free, or whatever. I'm not equating the two as in a religious sense, but just as a thought experiment here. So it's much easier just to make everything gluten free or kosher, so everyone can partake, than it is to make separate things for everyone. And so what this does is it allows things that are in the very minority to become now widespread everywhere. I just have to reset my camera every few minutes. So another thing that this does is we used to be able to eat peanuts on, that was the snack on an airline. Now, because there are some people who are deathly allergic to peanuts, well, now you find them nowhere. They're nowhere to be found. Some people just, with the smell of peanuts, they can't. They'll break out in hives, and they may have problems breathing. So, in order to prevent that one instance, which may only happen 1 in a million, they now say nobody can have peanuts. Another way that this is spread is English. English is not the best language, but let's say that it's one of the most widespread now because it's a lot of people speak it. Let's say you go into a meeting with people who there's one person from the United States, and typically people from the United States only speak English. So there's the one person from the United States. People in other countries, they tend to speak more than one language. And But if there's that one person who speaks English and they don't speak anything else, but everyone else speaks broken English, now that meeting is going to be held in English. So the one person can can communicate. Even if the meeting will be of it, less will come of the meeting because now 95% of the people are speaking broken English, and but the one is speaking, perfect English. Am I making sense? Is this principle kind of coming out, Adam? Am I making
I,
any sort of
I
sense?
think I think so. And one question I had for you, because you've read a little bit more of Taleb than I have, or a lot. I didn't get the sense that he was judging some of these particularly as right or wrong, correct? Like in the case of the kosher thing, it's like, well, yeah, okay, the lemonade's kosher. I didn't realize that, but tastes like lemonade. I'm fine with that. Fine, and so no big deal. It's just the idea that this phenomena is going on and it's being used in ways that maybe are dangerous to society. And in the case of, and not just from what people do with that, um, what companies or institutions do with that. But like in the case of the peanuts, he brings up, the fact that when we banned peanuts from the classroom, suddenly, the peanut allergies went up because you actually need exposure to some of these things to create the immunities that we need. And now, I believe doctors have even reversed some of their earlier um, prescriptions for how early you can give peanut butter to a child. And,
Yeah, he wasn't
anyways,
necessarily. Go ahead.
was that your takeaway too, that he wasn't necessarily judging it one way or the other?
He wasn't judging halal or gluten free or anything like that. He was just merely commenting on the phenomenon that is the 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 very vocal minority can drive things way more than they would tend to have influence otherwise.
Right, right. And in some cases it may be, the consequence may be fairly benign.
Yeah. So now getting back to Burger King, this can he mentioned in this particular article the how McDonald's tends to be it's a safe choice for a lot of people. So you're in a distant country, and let's say that you're not really familiar with the culture. There's probably delicious, just wonderful food everywhere, and you would be blessed to partake of that food. But you want something that's safe, and so you see a McDonald's on the corner. Oh, I'm going to go there instead. And so there's kind of this. It's going to the lowest common denominator in a way. It's like let's just do what everyone can agree on, right?
Right.
Or not have a problem with. So taking this further, I see a lot of companies doing this to an extent with a lot of the thought forms that are out there right now. For instance, Black Lives Matter. So it seems that every company now has to have a statement about Black Lives Matter. Now, I'm not going to comment necessarily, at least I don't think, on Black Lives Matter itself, except in with the fact that people must comment on it. If you don't comment on it, then you're basically commenting on it, if that makes
Right.
sense.
Yeah.
So it becomes less risky for a company to come out and put a Black Lives Matter statement that they're very in support of the message when they probably don't really care one way or the other. I mean, they of course want people to treat each other well, and they want they don't like racism, but they just want people to get off their back.
Yeah. Yeah. No, it's the easy way to keep the mob away from you, right? Um, just just put the sign up, right? And the mob will, it's kind of like what the Israelites did, right? Put the blood on the over the door, and the angel of death will pass over. Um, that's kind of where we are in society now.
Yeah, so there that goes back to virtue signaling and all of that. But the kind of general principle of this is that the minority can drive a narrative way further than it would have been able to otherwise. And there's a lot of factors that go into that. There's the emotionalism. Um, there's illusion. There's all sorts of things that can come into that. But I just wanted to kind of bring that up. That how do we counter this? What Adam? What do you think? Is the question that Taleb brings up is that there's a certain kind of minority that we have to be intolerant against. We have to be intolerant against the intolerant. And
Yeah, that was an interesting point, and you gotta. I don't know. I mean, I'd have to spend some time thinking about that. I don't know what the solution is. Well, part of the solution is, if yeah, I mean, it's a good question. A lot of people just don't want to get in the fray, and so they stay quiet, they stay silent. Unfortunately, we do have voices that fight back and that fight back consistently. And I think that's needed. Otherwise, where are we? I don't care what your belief is, right? I always want to hear the other side of the story. And I think society needs that, especially, a basically democratic type society needs to have that conversation. And once we reach, if we reach consensus on everything, whether through actual agreement or fear, um, that can't be a good thing. Not every issue is so cut and dry, and so we need those voices. That's one way, but the issue the point that Taleb brings up about um, being intolerant against the intolerant is it's a valid point. I don't know how you actually employ that other than because you've got to have enough mass support and enough voices out there, especially from the common guy, um, making those arguments and making those distinctions and not backing down and not changing your mind just because your teammates give you a call and make you feel bad. Sorry, Drew Brees. Whether he was on the right side or the wrong side of the issue at either point, I don't. That's not the point. It's that um, I felt like that wasn't his real stance, and he backed down to to that influence instead of just saying let's have the conversation about it and let's talk about what I actually said, and perpetuating the discussion further.
Drew Brees, this was about 6 months ago or so, and there was a lot of things in the news, and he said something. Was it about the flag, or was it about? Do you recall what he said specifically? He said he would always stand up for the flag, or something like that.
Yeah, I mean it was pretty benign, and it was
It
just
was innocuous.
his own personal view. We saw this with the Bachelor. I mean, I don't watch The Bachelor, but I know people that do, and
What's the Bachelor?
you don't know what The Bachelor is?
I'm
You
kidding.
do.
I've never
Um,
watched it.
I've never watched it either, but I know that it's on in many households across America, and I guess the host of that show um, said something about wanting to be um, understanding of one of the contestants who was under fire for something, a party she attended, and that just was not acceptable, um, and and so he apologized, and I don't know. I mean, right or wrong on an issue, to me becomes less important at that point than saying no to the counselors, right? It's not saying no to the other side. It's not saying, oh yeah, it's not okay to go to an antebellum party. It's not being able to say change your mind and have that conversation. That can continue without the can I cuss here, Tyler?
You've said all sorts of swear words already, so
Without the dip sheeps of Cancellation, being able to do their thing and run their and drive their agenda. I think you can. I think you can appeal and appease and change your mind on an issue, or without compromising. What you've said, and you can say, "Oh, I rethought it, and okay, yeah, I get that side of it, but I'm still standing by, and I think this cancellation crap is a bunch of BS. So I'm not quitting the show, or whatever. I mean, you're not going to cancel me. If the company wants to fire me, fine, that's their decision. But these backing down to the mob, I think and maybe there's your answer. We've kind of talked through it now. Um, from my point of view, is not letting the cancelers cancel, and
Yeah,
that's going to take having this conversation more and more, and really understanding the
yeah, we
issue.
don't we don't know how it's all going to shake out. I would hope that people wouldn't back down to the mob. Excuse me, I haven't personally had to bow to the mob yet, and I'm hoping to not
Yep.
have to do that. I won't, I unless I say something completely dumb. I've been known to say some pretty dumb things, and my family gets after me all the time. And I do look back on some of the things I said in my life that I've made some people feel bad. And so if I've ever made you feel bad and you're listening to this, I apologize. I'm working on that. But I will stand up for free speech. Not saying that you should make fun of people, but the principle of free speech is something to be defended and stood up for. Now, Bitcoin could be, or cryptocurrency, the blockchain could be something that helps along those lines to make people less cancelable. They're making the Bitcoin as a cryptocurrency that cannot be confiscated if you own the private keys. It's something that can be freely traded back and forth. There are no intermediaries. It's something that um, is very groundbreaking and changing the world. We may not see it exactly yet, but it is changing the world. One of the people, and I don't want to go too deep into this, that talks a lot about cryptocurrency and blockchain is his name is Balaji Srinivasan, and he talks about the pseudonymous economy, and we're talking about censorship here, and he thinks that soon people should be able to or will want to. They'll have their personal name, their actual name for government functions like going to the DMV, getting your driver's license, voting, things of those nature. You'll need your government ID for that. Then there's the next level, which is on, and you may have your real name on Facebook and certain um, social media sites like that. The next level are Reddit and Twitter, and then there's the completely anonymous, which is 4chan. So he's talking about people using pseudonyms, which are basically nicknames or other names that you go by to create to work under. So you can, I'm going to work under the name of Rio, and that's going to be my name online. Let's say you're a developer, you can say, okay, that's Rio. He does XYZ. That's him. There's no picture of him. We just know who he is. Um, we know of him. We know that this is kind of his deal. Um, so there's the idea that you can be pseudonymous and not people don't really know who you are, and that makes it so they can't affect your actual personal life. And then there's the next level, which is the completely anonymous. So a lot of people say what they really want to say when they're anonymous, and they say what they want people to. They say what people want them to say when they're using their real name. And so there's a lot of fakery on the internet, and it's an interesting concept that may start coming true more and more. I've used a lot of I've used Fiverr a lot. Fiverr is a it's a website that you can contract with people. You say, I need you to create a graphic for me. And you don't see the person's real name, but they can build up their reputation and, 5 stars, and this person was really great to work with. And I have no idea who that person is. And I don't really care as long as they produce what they said that they were going to produce, and we have a transaction. So there's that idea that you can create this online persona that you can create a living under. And then there's your real life. So people they're not gonna put together the two, because there's a problem of doxing people. And doxing, if you're not familiar with the term, it's basically revealing your true identity and addresses and phone numbers and things of that nature. So there are a number of things we've talked about. Cancel culture. We have to be intolerant of the intolerant. And I don't know exactly how that is going to work, how that will play out. There's also the cryptocurrency, the blockchain it's a public ledger that you cannot edit and alter after the fact, that will help kind of eliminate the cancel culture. Cancel culture needs to be canceled. And then there's this pseudonymous economy that some people are believing will help in this respect also. I don't know if these are the answers. I don't know if these are part of the answers, if they're all of the answers, but they're possibly some of the answers. What do you think, Adam?
No, that's fair. I don't. Yeah, I don't. I mean, I'm not. I guess as long as we have the culture that we have, that seems to be, you know, very effective in gaining momentum, council culture, then we probably, pseudonym creating pseudonyms for people, that may be the path to take in the short term. I don't like it for the long term, because I think it's just, if
It's a
it's come to
band-aid.
that, well, we've just lost our identity, right? Like, why can't you be free to be you, and say what you think without being a fear of losing your job or your bank account, or um, the government coming after you, or whatever it is, whatever the case, or just being rejected by friends and family. I mean, at the lowest level of society, that a lot of that is going on. And so, um, ultimately, I would rather hold the counselors accountable for this torturous um, phenomenon they've created. That's not the right word, but you know what I mean.
So we've talked about this very small minority that tends to drive a lot of narratives. We just need that small minority plus one or two to kind of counter it and be louder and be more vigilant and stand up for things that are going to make society better, and less looking over your shoulder, less worrying about offending someone with something that's totally innocuous. Um, we need to be that. They've said that the Renaissance came about by only 30 people or something like that. They're
70 or 80.
70 or 80. They're a group that is presents their ideas well enough and clear enough and strong enough in a a good enough. And I'm struggling here, so you can tell that I'm not going to be part of that group, but as clear as they can to get the idea out there, that it'll make a big change. You're going to say something funny, aren't you?
No, I was just thinking, you said 30 started the Renaissance, and I corrected you. 70 or 80. I'm like, I don't even know if that's true, but that's the figure I'd heard. But I said it so definitively that I kind of made myself out to be an ass.
That was convinced. You
But
convinced me. I would have,
yeah,
I would have bet quite a bit of money on it.
I'm pretty sure it's 80, Tyler.
It's 83. There was 83
You're,
people in the Renaissance that really pushed it
yeah.
forward.
Anyway, my apologies.
So we've talked about quite a bit today. We were going to talk about a bill. I don't think we will. but it's Bill HR 1, and there are a few good things in there that I've seen, but the majority of it, if you really liked how the election went in 2020 and all of the uncertainty and chaos, then this is your bill. If you like that, if you would like a little bit more certainty on the day of election, you would like a little bit more security, you would like a little bit more, you know, just kind of certainty, then this is a no on this bill.
Integrity. That was
Some integrity, if you would like some integrity, please,
in the election.
please. And it's already passed the House. They say some people say it's DOA in the Senate, but I'm not sure. I just never know nowadays. But if this bill passes, it's real trouble because it takes a
Yeah.
lot of the control from the states and their control over the elections, and it puts it in the federal government, and
So
that's not
we
always
can talk
good.
about that next week. Is that your plan
If there's still something, worth
to
talking
talk
about
about?
next week, yeah.
If you
Kidding. It's a, there's a lot of things. There's a lot of good going on in the world there, and I think most of it's behind the scenes. The good things, they tend to not get a lot of coverage, and uh, be someone who is promoting the good. Be someone who is promoting the goodwill. We talked about our goodwill project. To have goodwill toward your family, toward your friends. I know that I've had arguments with some family members, and I can be the I can come across as a little bit harsher than I really am sometimes.
yeah.
When I'm making an argument, my wife always gets upset at me because she tells me I get into lawyer speak, and I get really particular about the way things are said, and I I'm a loving person, I think, and just be nice to people. Be
Yeah.
firm with what you believe and what you know to be true, but be nice to people.
And name calling's probably not useful. I think I name call the counselors today. Did I call them bullsheepers or something? So I apologize to the counselors, but I'm still coming after you. Is
Okay, thank you. I
that
appreciate
fair?
that. So this
Not
is,
you.
yeah. Oh, I know. So our podcast is available on, well, it's on Facebook, it's on YouTube, it's on Apple Podcasts, it's on Spotify, it's on Google Podcasts, it's on pretty much all the places you can find podcasts. If you don't find it where you normally consume podcasts, please let us know. Go to citizenrepresentatives.com.org, excuse me. I should know the name of my own website. We're This is self-funded. We would like you to, if you feel so inclined to donate, we would really appreciate it. Help us cover the costs from this. Volunteer if you feel that you have a specific talent or something that you'd like to contribute. Please let us know. Anyway, we really appreciate you spending the time with us today. Any last thoughts, Adam?
Elon Musk is a guest on our show next week. Is that right?
I haven't confirmed with him,
Okay.
nor have I even asked him actually.
Oh, okay.
But if you have an in, then we'd have him on.
Oh, let's do it. All right. Okay. Just a tease.
All right.
No,
Well, we'll
I'm
catch
good.
you
Thanks,
next time.
Tyler.
Thanks, Adam.
Thank you.